I'm particularly delighted to welcome you here to the 25th Annual Architecture Lecture. It was started off in 1991 by Norman Foster, and Bjarke Ingels is the youngest architect ever to deliver the lecture. I don't know what that means, actually, being the youngest architect ever to... I think of all our architects as youthful. The annual architecture lecture is part of our architecture program, obviously. It was made possible by the Drew Hines Endowment for Architecture. And we're also particularly grateful for the support of Turkish Ceramics this year. Because I know nothing about architecture, I'm thrilled to be surrounded by so many people who do, and in particular by one of our newest academicians, the equally young Thomas Heatherwick, designer. Thomas, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm here. I've never introduced anyone in my life before, but I couldn't possibly say no to introducing this amazing speaker. When I was growing up, it felt that the challenge with architecture was that it could easily become impenetrable and sort of in its own bubble, and something that unless you'd sort of studied for 3 years, you could not understand, and it became kind of isolated. And Bjarke is someone who's managed to find a way to, it just is phenomenal. And we are working together in collaboration on a project for Google in Silicon Valley. And so I've had a chance firsthand. We spent all day together today, and we have been working together over the last year. And it's been a real privilege to see the way Bjarke works and his team. And there's someone who has a real passion for an idea and hunting down that idea and trying to help you kind of can't get more complex than architecture in terms of all the factors that an architect has to juggle and bring together, and that are all important, from the environmental performance to societal impact. And Bjarke has an incredible ability to bring that together and help people, whether they're an architect or not an architect, to see things with new clarity. And he's also managed to bring together an amazing team around him. So it's been a privilege for our team to be working alongside, and kind of everyone spurs each other on in quite special ways. And the way they evolve ideas and build up and accumulate till you get these kind of clear as a knife outcomes that are thrilling is brilliant. And so it's a phenomenal pleasure to introduce Bjarke, and we've spent quite a lot of time in Google's. They have these amazing kitchens where we're all together, and to fuel these all-day-long sessions. So I've spent quite a lot of time kind of with Bjarke, kind of woofing seaweed, weird kind of things in their snackery, which is quite a phenomenal thing. So Bjarke, welcome, and can't wait for your lecture.
I had way too many snacks at the Google kitchen with Thomas. Thanks for a lovely introduction. It's the pleasure has definitely been mutual, and it's quite inspiring to spend so much time in your sort of architecture cave here, also in London, where we spent a whole day. Like what I'd like to do now and for the next hour is to talk a little bit about how architecture happens, and specifically how it happens in our studio. There is actually a little bit of space up here if anyone is looking. 5 seats, unclaimed. Basically, our office is located in New York and in Copenhagen. This is our Copenhagen office. It's actually inside a former Carlsberg factory where they used to manufacture the least interesting part of the beer, which is the bottle cap. Apparently you need 13-meter ceilings to make tiny little things. We do haircuts. And recently we were asked to do an exhibition at the National Building Museum in Washington. And we came in and we were mesmerized by this amazing giant urban room. And then they showed us our gallery, and it was like 3 small spaces, also like really nice gallery spaces, but somehow disappointing compared to this. So we thought, why don't we turn the architecture of the building into the architecture of the exhibition? So we chose the colonnade. Our galleries were on the 2nd floor. So with the permission of the museum, we got to actually hang our models inside the atrium. So each colonnade or each arch becomes a vitrine. The distance to the model becomes what protects it from being sort of overly fingered and sabotaged. The handrail becomes the narrative. And in a way, the exhibition became almost like a journey, an 800-foot long journey around this sort of central atrium. So then we were thinking, like, how could we sort of organize this journey? And I came to think of one of my favorite exhibitions and books about architecture from the early 60s was Bernard Rudowski's Architecture Without Architects, a short introduction to non-pedigreed architecture at MoMA in New York. And basically what he did was that he had started to notice how buildings had started looking the same everywhere with the international style of modernism. This is like Gordon Bunshaft in New York, and a few years later, Arne Jacobsen in Copenhagen. So 2 completely different cities, almost identical buildings. And basically, one of the takes was that international style of modernism came with modern building engineering, building services. So what used to be resolved by the architecture, the design of the building, was now resolved by a machine. So electric lights replaced the dependence on windows. Mechanical ventilation replaced the need for opening windows. Air conditioning and central heating made you independent of the thickness or the material of the walls, the orientation of the windows. And finally, the architecture didn't do anything anymore. It just became an empty, or like a sort of a generic container of space with a gas-guzzling basement full of machinery, making it inhabitable. And as a result, architecture started looking the same everywhere. And what Rudowski was interested in was this idea of vernacular architecture, as he called it, the idea that over sort of centuries, local people had found ways to use the local materials to respond to the local climate in ways that would sort of adapt to the climate and sort of optimize living conditions. For instance, like the Greek villages where you have like the white walls that reflect heat, the flat roofs where you can enjoy the cool breeze in the evening. The igloos, where the sort of the minimum surface contains a maximum contained space. Like in the sort of flatlands in China, you have like sunken courtyards protected from the prevailing winds. So we're not suggesting this sort of idea of like going back to where we came from, but rather what you could call vernacular 2.0, that potentially we could use contemporary technology, our capacity to sort of calculate and simulate and model the environmental performance of a building, the thermal exposure of a building volume, the airflow, the currents. So rather than sort of architecture without architects, what we're interested in was what you could call sort of engineering without engines, to actually use sophisticated engineering to put the qualities back into the permanent qualities of the building. So we thought, like, rather than the sort of world map of nations, what really has an impact on architecture is the world map of climates. And essentially the challenges you meet in this part of the world might be the same as you meet in this part of the world because they're actually part of the same climate. So we thought, like, why don't we organize the entire exhibition and the book according to the world climate as a journey from hot to cold. So basically, as you move through the exhibition and the book, you see how buildings and designs sort of respond to different conditions. Sort of in the extreme climates, it's very much the heat or the cold that determines the architecture. But in the sort of more temperate climates, other factors take over. So as a result, like, we sort of color-coded it from red to blue, sort of this sort of thermal index. It also became this like beautiful gay flag before everybody changed their Facebook photo to the rainbow. And the cover is this sort of thermal imprint. But basically, just to give you sort of an idea, like 5 years ago, we got invited to do a competition in Shenzhen, one of the most sort of industrious cities in the world. It's a humid subtropical climate, and it was the headquarters for the local energy company. It's essentially a 1 million square foot office building in a subtropical climate. So in a way, you want to resolve the dilemma that you want to maximize views in daylight and you want to minimize glare and thermal exposure. So we designed the facade like a pleated dress together with Arab engineering. So we sort of maximize views to the north. We block all the direct sunlight from the south. And as a result, when you look south, you see sort of a beautiful bamboo wall washed in daylight. And as you turn around, you see like this all glass facade looking north. And this, within this logic, you can create entrances, you can create sort of executive meeting rooms looking to the north. But essentially, this basic idea, without any moving parts, any technology, actually reduces the energy consumption for cooling with 30%. Purely because of the geometry of the building. It also has an impact on the experience from the inside. But basically, what is striking is that this building ends up looking different purely because it performs differently. It's currently under construction. It is almost like this sort of mega ornamentation that is actually driven by a sort of a logical, non-mechanical response to the climate. So having looked into this, we found that there were like more nuances, and we got invited to do a competition in Montpellier in the south of France. It's the cradle of a sort of modern medicine. It has like an amazing collection of ancient sort of medical artifacts. It has like the first pharmaceutical garden, the Jardin des Plantes in Montpellier. It was like this sort of meeting point between Western and Middle Eastern medicine. And we got invited to do a competition for a museum of the human body. It was located between the city and a big park. It had like a whole sort of component of a whole program of different components that needed to operate together and autonomously. So we sort of designed them almost like a sort of a zipper of individual sort of interlocking pavilions, placing it in the park. In a very simple way, we sort of, rather than blocking off the city from the park, the zipper actually allows passage through, even though it is an entire sort of one-story building at the edge of the park. It actually becomes almost like an osmotic membrane between city and park. The sort of curvilinear facade allows islands of nature to enter the city and islands of city to enter the park, overlooking the landscape. But basically, it's also the warmest city in all of France. It's incredibly sunny and incredibly warm. So because we wanted to have like a visual relationships from the exhibition to the park, we needed to create some kind of a shading. And basically, when you look at the principles of shading, when you're facing south, you want horizontal louvers because they block the high angle of the incoming sun. The more you go towards the east and the west, the more ideal louver is vertical. So it can sort of block the low angle of the incoming sun in the morning and the evening. But when you apply that logic to a curvilinear facade, the optimum angle slightly adjusts as soon as you sort of turn a few degrees east or west. So we actually devised a small formula that could calculate the optimum orientation of a louver at any given orientation of the facade. and simply applied it to the unfolded facade, it becomes this almost like a human thumbprint, something that looks like highly organic, almost ornamental, but in fact it is an almost automatic response of the geometry of the building responding to the orientation and the climate and the location on the planet it's part of. So both from the outside as well as on the inside, it adds this layer of refinement that is not aesthetic or intuitive, but actually purely driven by this sort of blatant response to the surroundings. So basically, when you are working in these extreme climates, the climate is so demanding that it sort of overrules all other concerns. But when you're working in other contexts, in other climates, other concerns might take over and become what sort of takes hold of the design process. We're doing a project next to Hamlet's castle, Kronborg, north of Copenhagen. Kronborg recently became a UNESCO World Heritage. The Danish Maritime Museum used to be inside the castle. They had to kick it out because when Hamlet was around, it was a royal palace, not a museum. So the brief said, put the museum inside this decommissioned dry dock right outside the castle moat. But there was this dilemma because UNESCO said that we couldn't stick as much as a foot out of the ground to not disrupt the view of the castle. Whereas the museum wanted some kind of an architectural masterpiece that could attract visitors. So we got the idea to use the museum as a way to radically preserve the dock, turning the dock inside out, wrapping it with the museum. It becomes like a giant void sunken into the quay. All we had to do was design 3 bridges, one that sort of stops the water from coming in, one that connects to the castle, and one that sort of gradually descends down and provides access for the visitors into the museum, because we weren't even allowed to have an elevator coming out to not disturb the view of the castle. So basically, we sort of built the museum around the existing dock. We could manufacture the bridges in a shipyard in China and sail it in and lift it into place, like sort of giant vessels sunken into the dock. Here you see the sort of the gradual descent down into the museum. And inside the museum, it becomes like the floors are sloping, similar to the experience you have on a ship. They're always sloping within the limits of the law, bringing you slowly down towards the bottom. Some spaces are incredibly intimate. Some places are really vast, like sort of cargo bays. We could suddenly bring daylight so that, by European code, you're not allowed to have workspaces that don't have a vertical window. So we could actually move the administration and the staff that was supposed to be in another building into the dock, because suddenly the dock itself becomes a light well. The galleries in the bridges bring daylight into the exhibition. You have this sort of encounter between the lightness and the transparency of the steel and the glass with the sort of heavy sort of a heritage of the industrial dock. You have the auditorium, which is another bridge, where the sort of the raking seats of the auditorium continues underneath the stage and becomes an auditorium for the children. The restaurant, where the dock wall continues inside, and you have this sort of view through all the different layers of transparency. Actually, to keep the dock from actually becoming a ship, we needed to pile it down with these earth anchors, 600 earth anchors that actually go 42 meters into the ground. So paradoxically, the Danish Maritime Museum is actually the tallest building we've built in Denmark. It's just from the horizon and down. And also this space, actually, the sunken space is public. It's part of the city of Elsinore. So it's actually also become a quite popular sort of a concert venue for performances, because it actually has amazing acoustics because of the hard reflection of the walls and the open ceiling. It actually has an an amazing quality for music. And here you see this sort of idea that above the horizon, it's the unmolested heritage, and below the horizon, it's this sort of completely contemporary new world. This is this sort of inverse Titanic moment. So basically, the way we try to work is that you can say that at the beginning of each project, each challenge we get, we try to spend a lot of time educating ourselves in what are the key criteria in this project. What is the biggest problem we need to solve, or what is the greatest potential we can unfold? And essentially, we try to then sort of ask the right people, the users, the clients, the different consultants, the experts, and we try to identify what is the information we need in order to make informed design decisions. Another example is that we were invited to do a sports hall in my old high school in Copenhagen. And you could only put it two places, out on the soccer field, the football field, or in the courtyard. But the football is, like it is here, like the favorite sport of all Danes. So that would be like a political suicide. So we suggested to put it in the courtyard, which is where the students have their time off, which is also kind of a risky business. It was going to be a handball hall, which is the second national sport of Denmark. And the rules say that you need 4.5 meters clear on the perimeter and 8 meters clear in the middle. And we wanted to minimize the excavation, but also minimize the impact on the courtyard. So as a sort of homage to my old math teacher from high school, we based the design of the roof structure on the mathematical formula for a ballistic arch, so that essentially the gracious curvature of the glulam beams is not sort of arbitrary, it's actually tracing the trajectory of a thrown handball. So the canteen has always been in the basement. It's one of the beauties of designing something for a place where you spend 3 years of your life, is that I really knew how it worked. So like we basically create a new entrance into the restaurant that then continues down into the sports hall. Skylights along the perimeter wash daylight down along the concrete walls. And essentially what you see is what you get. The glue lamps in the ceiling are the structure. The concrete walls are the retaining walls, so that we didn't spend as much as a euro on paint or added finishes. In the courtyard, the edge of the sports hall is the height of a bench. And then we place these sort of simple pieces of furniture, like of course the slope of the roof, like this sort of giant molehill, is too steep to follow any building code, but still, you know, it's young people, so it becomes incredibly well used. The janitor believes that he can prove scientifically that we've tripled the use of the courtyard, because he had to place 3 times as many rubbish bins in the courtyard after it opened. But essentially these like very simple sort of inviting gestures, almost like abstract art pieces. The lighting has been integrated into the furniture. So essentially this idea that like once you've identified the key criteria, it becomes a driving force for the design process. But it's not like once you know what the question is that you already have the answer. You have to go through like tens or hundreds of iterations. As a result, we built a lot of models to test each idea against the selection criteria. And to give you sort of a view on how this happens, we're doing a project in Switzerland, in this beautiful valley, Vallée du Choux, in south of Geneva. This is our site. It's a museum of watchmaking. We're doing it for Audemars Piguet, the watchmaker company founded by Monsieur Audemars and Piguet. It was going to be placed right next to the historical workshop where they started the company 150 years ago and their current headquarters. And our first intuition was to try to wedge the museum in between the 2 existing buildings. That seemed like the most peaceful and sort of well-integrated way to go. But it quickly became like this sort of annoying stranger, like butting in between 2 friends. So we thought perhaps we should look at the landscape at the bottom of the hill. and really stay low. The brief had a lot of different galleries. There was a very specific exhibition brief. So like, what about an interconnected village of little galleries? You could organize them in different ways, maybe like almost like a journey through the different exhibitions, and where you end up in the historical workshop. But of course, that could be done in more or less invasive ways. So at some point we thought, like, maybe we should just really stay low. And as you can see, like, gradually as things unfold, a process like this gets a life on its own, and things sort of gradually spin out of control. So basically what we ended up doing was basically we take the exhibition program, we turn it into a single linear narrative, which is what they asked for, but then we coil it up to fit on the site in this sort of simple sort of a spiral that actually allows for shortcuts from one to the other. There's a single route that takes you to the workshop as the last part. We tilt the roof to allow daylight and air to reach deep into the galleries and allow views of the surrounding valley. So you enter through the existing headquarters, and the first thing you see is a view into the valley. And then you go through this journey of different spaces, some with like controlled lights, some with like, you have like workshops where the specialty watchmakers get daylight and look over the valley to the north. At the heart of the exhibition, you have sort of a huge gallery. And then maybe like, if you look around, you can see that there's something missing in the images. There are absolutely no columns. And that's because, in a way similar to watchmaking, that watchmaking is sort of, in many ways, this sort of art and science of trying to get the maximum impact with the minimum of material. Some of the main disciplines in watchmaking is skeletonization, where you excavate all the redundant material, like miniaturization, where you make things as small as possible. And glass is actually incredibly strong, actually stronger than steel when it comes to compression, but it can't take tension, and in a seismic event, in an earthquake, it buckles and breaks. But because of the curvature of the building, the curve actually provides rigidity to the glass, so we can actually make this like super light pavilion where the ceiling is literally floating on the structure, and you have this like very open relationship to the surrounding valley. And then finally, you finish the visit through this sort of refurbished element into the historical workshop of the original founders. So basically, when you describe it like this, it feels almost inevitable that this is the only way that this museum could be. You just forget that you had to kiss like 50 frogs before you found the one idea that seemed to work. Another sort of driver of architecture and the sort of organization of space can be the internal program and the programmatic needs. One of our projects in Copenhagen is an entire city block that has like very generic urban programs. It has like shops and offices that we place close to the ground and close to the customers. On top, we place townhouses, exploring the fact that residential has shallower floor depths than offices. We get little gardens in front and a small public path. Then we add a layer of apartments, and then sort of another layer of townhouses that recreate the gardens on a higher level. The master plan asked for sort of a shortcut through the block, so we turn it into a figure 8 with these urban spaces. And then finally, because shops and offices, they like daylight, but they hate glare and sunshine, they spend energy on cooling. So to the south, we lower them to the ground. To the north, we create a 4-story office building, also lifting up the residences into the light and the view. And then to the southwest, we sort of lower the corner. And these like very gradual and very practical adjustments of the city block end up creating a sort of a city block where the streetscape is actually invited to invade the 3-dimensional space of the block. It's literally located at the city limits of Copenhagen. other life forms take over on the other side of this lake. But basically this thinking doesn't only allow us to optimize the conditions for the individual programs, like lifting up the townhouses in the sun and the view, leaving the bigger floor plates for institutions and commercial programs. But also it sort of expands the public realm, the possibility for social encounters, almost like in a sort of Smithson's-esque sort of a fantasy of modernism. It actually invites the small-scale community of the townhouses into the three-dimensional space of the block. You can see the offices occupying the spaces in the shade, lifting up the housing into the sun. And here you see the north facade, which is dedicated to offices, becoming residences when it's facing west. And you actually have this sort of really sort of small-scale city life occurring at every level of the block. At the heart, where the 8 crosses itself, all of the amenities have been bundled up in this sort of vertical atrium that connects everything from the ground to the ceiling. And you really get this thing that the 8 house is not just some kind of a interesting facade architecture or an interesting sculpture. It's really like a three-dimensional urban condition where like these 2 girls live actually on the 10th and the 8th floor, but they can actually sort of walk down and visit each other. So it really sort of recreates this sort of a small-scale neighborhood on the 10th floor in a soon-to-be dense city. So literally like this sort of the practical sort of optimizations of the program ends up having a sort of a social agenda on its own. So I often got this sort of objection when I came and showed some of the things we were doing in Copenhagen, that yeah, sort of this was only possible in sort of socialist Scandinavia. So at some point 5 years ago, we got invited to look at a site on the west side of Manhattan, which is, it's called Hell's Kitchen, and the site is on the waterfront, but it's sandwiched between a waste management garage, a power plant, and the West Side Highway. So we thought, like, they really need an oasis. And basically, the typical Copenhagen courtyard, this is the city block where my dad grew up, is at the architectural scale what Central Park is at the urban scale, an oasis in the middle of the city. So our basic suggestion was, like, what happens when you combine the density of a skyscraper with the communal space of a courtyard? Or essentially, what could a court scraper look like? So we place the courtyard on the waterfront. We give it the Manhattan density by lifting it to 500 feet in the northeast corner. We keep the southwest corner low to allow the sun during the day and the afternoon, the views over the Hudson River. And as a result, we get this sort of striking new character on the waterfront of New York. It has this sort of, it's a hyperbolic paraboloid. It has this sort of warped swoosh. It has like terraces sunken into the roof. From the east, it looks like a spire. The courtyard actually has the same proportions as Central Park, only it's 13,000 times smaller. So sort of a bonsai Central Park. On the southwest corner is the height of a handrail, and in the northeast, it's the height of a high-rise. So basically, as we sort of started to sort of make it happen, of course, one of the main challenges of this building is what we've called the roof wall, and also as this sort of concert of practicalities. The geometry is a so-called hyperbolic paraboloid. So all of the ruling lines are straight, so that's why all the elevations are straight lines. Also, you need to be able to access and maintain this. It's a 500-foot tall building, so these are the main rails for the BMU, the Building Maintenance Unit. Then we have the gravity lines, which is essentially if you drop a marble on this surface, it's going to roll down along these lines. They're slightly warped, completely straight to the east, and then they get more and more warped as the geometry unfolds. And then finally, all of the horizontal layers are straight in elevation, but curved in plan. And once you combine these basic geometries, you get the geometry for where the the terraces are sunken into the roof, and that becomes the basic logic for the facade. And this is how far we've gotten so far. But essentially, the BMU, of course, the window cleaner is the most important thing when you're designing a skyscraper or court scraper. So the BMU runs along these lines. I think we should actually, almost like a theme park ride, charge money for people cleaning the facade. Then you have the gravity lines that are the rails for the BMU to descend down, but they're also the substructure for the facade. So basically, each of these rails is where you click in the prefabricated units for the terraces and the facades. So essentially, the maintenance, the sort of geometry and the structure of the facade is one sort of integrated element. You have the sort of universal joint that the rails click into. You have the stainless steel rail that is part of the articulation of the facade, and that gradually becomes the whole geometry. So it's just like you can say, the classic skyscraper evolved like this sort of symphony of utility and constructability and sort of leasability. In a similar way, the court scraper and the tectonic of the warped south facade is a child of this sort of similar rigorous logic. And you start sort of anticipating the sort of the canyon that the courtyard is going to be. So essentially, this sort of perfect hybrid of a Scandinavian and a sort of an American typology put together. So having arrived to America, we then bumped into Google and this guy. And sort of, you can say Google has been quite interesting because over the last decades, they've definitely sort of fueled, been part of this sort of engine that has fueled the global economy. Also, the Google workplace with its sort of colorful, sort of happy, active, and sort of healthy, and sometimes not so healthy snack bars have been sort of become the standard of all of Silicon Valley. It's been sort of copied almost by any startup. And you can say now that Google has, over the last 2 decades, gone from being this sort of garage startup to being a behemoth of 30,000 people worldwide. It seemed like it was time not to just be a hermit crab, sort of accommodating yourself in spaces left behind by others, but actually to venture into the physical world. And you can say with the Google car and Google Cardboard and hardware and sort of Nest and robotics, Google has really started taking this step. Also, you can say Google, with its 20,000 employees currently in Mountain View, has pretty much the same size as the downtown Mountain View proper. And this sort of a situation is actually sort of endemic for all of Silicon Valley, that for each town, you actually have a sort of technology town of a similar size and proportion. So it became clear that these technology companies can't just be little fortresses on their own. They have to become genuine neighborhoods in the communities that they're part of. And together with Google and Heatherwick, we came up with this basic strategy of saying Silicon Valley, it sounds so green and nice, but actually it's more parking than park as it is today. So basically to bring the nature back by incorporating some of the parking into the landscape, and also by looking intensely into alternate ways of moving around. Then we provide a sort of a glass canopy, a transparent sky that regulates daylight levels, creates a thermally controlled interior, regulates air quality and noise levels. And within this sort of a draped glass sky, we place the workspaces almost like furniture, organized informally and with the possibility of adapting to future needs. So almost like in this sort of split up, you can see this sort of glass fabric draped over, lifting up the skirt on the edges, allowing activities to spill out and create a lively public exterior, inviting people to actually pass through the inside of the canopy. organizing the workspaces like platforms, almost like favela-like landscapes of workstations, creating like landscapes underneath the glass fabric, creating sort of shortcuts between the different levels to actually sort of retain this like really formal, like informal feeling of continuous workspace without sort of cementing the status quo into a permanent layout, lifting up the edges to provide sort of lively and more sort of urban, active street corners. And basically by bringing the nature back, not just under the glass canopy, but also under the green canopy, you'll find sort of different activities related to this sort of new neighborhood. So this is very much like a work in progress, but I think sort of one of the most admirable examples I've experienced where a client really believes firmly in the value of research and design. It's not like Google is interested in paving everything with marble or gold. Like they're not interested in like burning cash just to show off. But if you can spend a lot of resources on something where you know that it's a valid problem to solve without even knowing that you have a solution, just the idea of investing in it could give you something that you could then maybe like reproduce as a general problem to solve, not just for Google, but in general. And we had this sort of amazing moment where Larry Page was referring to some kind of people mover system. And we asked if it was something that already existed within a certain industry. And they said, yeah, they looked into it in different cases. There wasn't really anything out there, but it was nothing $50 million can't solve. And I think that's sort of it's food for thought to have this idea that research and design can really be put forward as something that can actually provide solutions to something where we don't necessarily see the solution right now, but we know that if we take the right minds and the right technology and apply it, we're probably going to get there. So also like another way that architecture could sort of be influenced by infrastructure, we're looking at a site in downtown Vancouver where Granville Bridge touches downtown. It turns into a trifork and it slices up this site into useless triangles. Which is why it hasn't been developed, even though it's probably one of the nicest sites in all of Vancouver. We got sort of hired to look at what you could do. We just started mapping all the constraints, setbacks from the streets, setbacks from the bridges. Then there's like a 30-meter setback because the city wants to ensure that nobody looks into the heavy traffic of the bridge. Another setback to not cast shadows into the park. And finally, we're left with a tiny footprint of 600 square meters, almost too small to build. But then we thought, like, if it's about a minimum distance from the residence to the bridge, what if you get 30 meters up in the air? You could come back out and create a nice 1,200 square meter floor plate. So basically, as you drive over the bridge, it's almost as if someone is pulling a curtain aside, sort of welcome to Vancouver. Like a genie coming out of the bottle, or like a weed growing between the cracks in the asphalt and blossoming as it reaches into the sky and the air. So it reminds us very much of the Flatiron, which is essentially like in a similar way, it's a child of the diagonal intersection of Broadway with the city grid of Manhattan. And then at this moment where real estate value, elevators and steel structure suddenly made it a plausible development, and now it's the namesake and one of the most beautiful buildings in New York. Except we're taking it sort of one step further. And basically underneath the bridge, we're trying to sort of turn the underside of the bridge into an asset. For instance, there's a lot of like significant photo artists in Vancouver. We're working with a handful, including Rodney Graham, to turn the underside of the bridge into this sort of a Sistine Chapel of street art. Essentially like a picture gallery turned upside down. Making the underside into this sort of like lively new space in the heart of the city of Vancouver. And it's currently under construction. Our client has become so confident that he has named the building the Vancouver House, which is like bound to trigger some kind of hubris, but so far so good. And you can see like the interaction with the public of all the work we do, even though a lot of it is actually privately commissioned, is a very significant driver of the design. And typically, we do it by trying to sort of imagine, or like we ask the clients what they would like, or like we try to sort of take into account as many things as we can. But in some cases, we've actually sort of almost like handed over the authorship to the public. And 2 years after opening our office in New York, Hurricane Sandy came and wiped out the city. According to the New Yorker, it gave rise to a whole new neighborhood in New York, Sao Paulo, south of Power. And basically the theory is simple, is that with the rising temperatures, the Atlantic hurricane zone has expanded north and south, and suddenly states that didn't used to be hit by tropical storms are now being hit very frequently. And because of the 90-degree funnel shape of New York Bight, 50% of the most densely populated part of the eastern seaboard is currently at risk. If you look at the map of Manhattan, you can see that since the 17th century, we've sort of expanded through landfill the area of Manhattan, and this area that we have created ourselves is also the area that is now prone to get flooded. So we got commissioned in a kind of competition by the Housing and Urban Development Department of New York, of the United States, to see if we could create the flood protection without creating a seawall that would segregate the life of the city from the water around it. And we thought like in this sort of line of social infrastructure, like learning from the High Line, which is now one of the most popular promenades in New York City, it is essentially a piece of decommissioned infrastructure that has acquired a social and environmental program. What if we don't have to wait for the train tracks to shut down or for the coastal protection to become decommissioned? What if we could actually imagine all of the resilience infrastructure of Manhattan to come with sort of anticipated, intended, positive social and environmental side effects? Basically, you can say that the city development of New York has been very much shaped by the encounter of these two giants. On the one hand, Robert Moses, also known as the power broker, a public servant that created a lot of the very necessary projects of New York City, highways and social housing projects, always very top down and often with devastating impact on the local community. At some point, he tried to plow a highway through Greenwich Village, and he encountered resistance from Jane Jacobs, who rallied the local community, and in a sort of David Goliath moment managed to defeat the plans and save the village. So we thought what would be interesting for the dry line, as we've called this project, could be to consider it as a love child of Robert Moses and Jane Jacobs. Because in order to resist an incoming storm surge, we need 12 miles of contiguous waterfront protection, but to make it socially and urbanistically successful, it needs to happen in a close dialogue with the local community. So in a period of 1 year, we identified all of the different user groups. We reached out to the different people from different communities, and together with them, we tried to design the necessary flood protection in a way that would actually contribute to their neighborhoods. And we made this small film together with Squint Opera here from London, with the people, where you can see the people we worked with, their experience of Sandy and their dreams and concerns for future flood protection.
That was actually why Sandy was so bad, is because of the phase of the moon, it was already a very large high tide, as well as the storm surge coming in with the wind and the tide lining up perfectly to give us 14-foot tides instead of 8-foot.
The most shocking part of Hurricane Sandy was the fact that it exceeded expectations.
I think the sheer magnitude of it caught a lot of people off guard.
When Hurricane Sandy came, we were not prepared at all. I mean, not even the slightest.
Yeah, it was like an alien invasion of water. And not the good kind of water.
So yeah, I mean, it came right in front where there was literally boats on 14th Street floating in front of our window.
We had a sub-basement level office a block from here, and it was totally covered in water for 2 days. So we lost everything. Everything.
We're really concerned about another storm and the flooding that's possible, and we think that the next time it's going to come even further inland.
I'd like to see some type of flood protection in this area. That's going to happen. We're vulnerable, obviously, being close to the water.
Something that just brings like more walks, different walks of life, you know, another escape from just the busyness and the hustle and bustle.
There's this great space that could really become community space, cultural space, and active uses.
Everyone enjoys space. And in New York and other congested cities, it's hard to come by.
Anything that makes the cities greener is just such a wonderful thing for not only the environment, but the people that live in the city too, to be able to be around that space.
The plans, the berming, the sense of how it can become into the natural landscape itself, how we want to program that is really the next challenge. We are the link, we're the tip in a sense of the big U. It's important that the entire waterfront of Lower Manhattan build in the plans that have been put forward, because we can not only fortify this great city of New York, but be a model for cities all over the world.
So actually the dry line, we're currently doing the first 2 miles of the East River as a sort of as a pilot for how the dry line could be realized as this sort of hybrid between infrastructure and public space. So speaking of disasters hitting Manhattan, obviously I think the disappearance of the Twin Towers at 9/11 was one of the most sort of impactful and sort of widely broadcasted events of the last 2 decades. It sort of left behind a giant wound in downtown Manhattan, and has actually caused almost like a sort of a migration away from Lower Manhattan over the last 15 years. It's been depopulated quite massively. The footprints of the towers that collapsed have now become part of the 9/11 Memorial, which is an 8-acre park that commemorates the events of 9/11 and the people that lost their lives. And today, the One World Trade Center, aka the Freedom Tower, now stands, and the last puzzle that remains is 2 World Trade Center, the sort of the smaller sibling of One World Trade. And like 6 months ago, we got invited to design this last piece of the puzzle, actually, where a design by Norman Foster had been sort of waiting for 10 years without finding any tenants. we got sort of invited in probably one of the most intimidating commissions we've ever received to try to imagine what could this last tower be like. Because like, not only is it part of the towers that sort of frame the memorial, it's going to be the sort of part of this sort of ascending spiral of towers according to Daniel Liebeskind's master plan. On one hand, it's surrounded by an open space, the park, the transportation hub, the churchyard, Silverstein Plaza, but also it's part of a dense neighborhood. I live on Franklin and Church, and when I walk down to work in the morning, I'm literally walking in the streets of Tribeca until I reach the site of the 2 World Trade Center. So it's also really the encounter between the sort of almost European streetscape of Tribeca and this sort of the cradle of the American skyscraper. So we thought it could also be interesting if we could design a building at this intersection that could be equally part of the sort of colonnade of towers that frames the memorial, but also conceived almost as a sort of vertical village of city blocks stacked on top of each other, or like try to see how you could bring these two identities and neighborhoods together. Also, it's going to be the home of Fox and News Corp, the cinema company, the television company, the print media, which is a very different kind of client than or tenant than the typical bank, because you have like so radically different floor plate sizes, huge floor plates for the studios, large floor plates for the newsrooms, but then you still have the sort of classic tenant spaces that you expect in a sort of downtown location. So it's almost like literally a lot of different buildings coming together as one. For the lower levels, News Corp and Fox wants big open creative floor plates where everybody can see each other. On the upper levels, Silverstein, which is the owner of the site, wants like a sort of a classic skyscraper floor plates with the central core and good leasing depths all around. Because of the wedge shape of the site, if we want to try to keep like nice rectangular floor plates that are flexible and free, the larger or longer we make the floor plates, the more slender they need to be, also to bring daylight to the spaces that don't have a central core. And then every time the elevators sort of taper out as you reach towards the top, we can make the floor plates shorter, but then they can also become wider. So essentially we imagine like taking all of these individual buildings within the building, pile them up to become sort of a vertical tower, sort of regimented by the wedge of light, according to Liebeskind's master plan, that ensures that light at 2 specific times a day will reach the 2 footprints at September 11. So basically on the ground, the largest possible floor plate for all of the film studios, and then essentially this sort of series of floor plates that each time the floor plate gets shorter, it can get a little wider. That ends up creating a tower that sort of diminishes when you look north-south, but actually expands towards the west and creates a leaning facade that almost echoes the reclining facade of One World Trade Center. So not like creating 2 twins, but creating some kind of a mutual relationship between the 2 towers, a series of hanging gardens stepping down towards the church. And that basically becomes this sort of a series of ascending sort of articulation from Marquis' minimalism to Roger's sort of bundle of towers to sort of our sort of leaning stack of elements to One World Trade. As you look up from the memorial, the tower almost creates the illusion of leaning along the reclining facade of One World Trade. From Tribeca, it seems like a stack of individual city blocks stacked on top of each other with giant gardens. So basically, when you look at the roof plan, you have like each block within the block has a gigantic outdoor garden because they're at very different elevations, it's almost like the different microclimates you have when you climb a hill. So from like almost like tropical lush landscapes on the lower levels, as you sort of move up through the tower, it moves towards almost like an Arctic tundra at the top at the 1,100 feet. Also, like the way it lands is that because it's not just sitting on Manhattan bedrock, it's actually sitting on 11 different subway lines, a sort of a service road and a power station that serves all of Lower Manhattan. The cores, the columns have already been put into place. So it's like this exercise of connecting the dots, because from the second floor and above, we place the structure where it wants to sit in the floor plan. But on the ground, it's already been decided where it needs to go. And in a similar way, the cores, we try to have as rational and straightforward cores as possible. Once they reach the ground, they need to sort of morph to find the footprint where they've been intended. And that actually means that you get an almost Liebeskind-esque lobby. But it's not sort of expressive architecture. It's almost like structural necessity, just literally translating in the most direct trajectory from the second floor to the ground. And the two different elevations are so different. North-south, it's like almost like a staircase to heaven. East-west, it's like expanding towards the sky. We articulate the facade vertically towards the memorial, like a classic skyscraper, and towards the Tribeca and the rest of the city. Where you have the building blocks stacked on top of each other, we articulate the horizontal elements. The downward-facing overhang becomes a reinvention of the news ticker, addressing the streetscape. So it's like an incredibly lively building from one side and a more formal building towards the memorial. And inside, because we're actually tailoring, which is rather unique for a skyscraper, we're actually tailoring the floors to their future tenants. So we're sort of organizing the amenity spaces, restaurants that sort of reach out to the large terraces, courtyards that are sunken down to bring daylight to conference spaces, large amenities that have access out to the terrace. But then also sort of each of the buildings within the building have this sort of series of cascading atria that actually connect, so that from any floor within News Corp or Fox, you can actually have direct visual relationships and physical shortcuts to your colleagues above and below, leading all the way down to the terraces, kind of eliminating the vertical segregation that happens in a vertical building. And of course, capturing some of the elements like the Calatrava station as the backdrops, or the East River for the broadcasting. We even carving out space from the mechanical rooms for amenities, so there's going to be a running track and a climbing wall between the cooling plants within the building. And of course, like this like epic screening room at the top of the building, where when the movie is over, the image gets even more beautiful. This building was recently sort of presented and I think remarkably well received by serious media, let me say, and I think one of the interesting things is that when you do something as an architect, you can put all of your intentions and all of your ideas and concerns and demands and dreams and desires and interpretations into it. But once you put it out there, it is a piece of public art and it belongs to everybody. So everybody will have an interpretation that is probably just as good as yours. And I received a letter from this gentleman who saw the design, and he wrote me that his brother was one of the first responders from the 22nd Engine Company in the New York Fire Department, who gave his life at 9/11. And the brother, was very, very happy with the design, because the way he saw it was that he saw it as a giant staircase reaching towards the heaven, invoking the heroic stair climb of the first responders from 9/11. Also like invoking the ascent to the heavens by the innocent souls that died during 9/11. And to him, it was a very sort of reassuring thought that not just the memorial itself with the two fountains, but the actual skyline of Manhattan would honor the heroism and the sacrifice from 9/11. And this is nothing we had thought about at all when we did the building or designed the building. But again, it's this idea that once you put it out there, it's no longer yours. It's basically everybody else's. And finally, the most northern project we've done is a ski resort we're designing in Levi in the north of Lapland in Finland. And the basic thinking is it's on the top of the ski resort. And we just thought that basically to design the roofs of the ski resort. So in the morning, you take the elevator up and then you ski down through the roof. And as a sort of a ski urbanism, no surface in the entire master plan is sloping less than 8%, which is the minimum slope you need to be propelled by gravity. And all of the streets end at the lift. And of course, it creates these nice spaces within, and the buildings themselves become part of the view around you. So that sort of leads me to I think one project that we've done, the last I'd like to share, that I think in many ways captures almost everything we've been trying to do over the last decade. And it might be the new landmark of Copenhagen, but it's not a royal palace or a cultural palace. It's basically a power plant that turns household trash into electricity and heating. So together with the citizens of Copenhagen, it forms an ecosystem where trash becomes a resource. Basically, a ton of household trash equals 1 2/3 of an oil barrel in energy value. It works on an economy of scale, so it is like big, ugly boxes that cast shadows on the neighbors and block the views. It's going to be the tallest and biggest building in all of Copenhagen. It's right next to the Copenhagen Marina and right where the locals go water skiing. So we thought to ourselves, how can we make this building a contribution to the neighborhood and not just some eyesore? And basically, we have snow in Denmark. We have absolutely no mountains. But apparently, we do have mountains of trash. So we have to go 6 hours by car to Isaberg in Sweden to ski, alpine skiing. We can do 2/3 of Isaberg because of the sheer magnitude of this power plant. We know how big the different machinery, different parts of the machinery are. So basically, we transform the entire roof into a giant ski slope with a black, a blue, and a green ski slope. We put this idea forward in the competition, and miraculously, we won the competition based on this suggestion. It even comes with like pine trees located on top of the columns, framing the ski slope. And basically, once you have to sort of figure out how to do it in reality, you get this interesting interface that the general slope comes from the geometry of the plant, but then you have different kinds of things that need to vent out, almost like sort of volcanic activity inside the mountain that actually contribute to orchestrating the ski slope. Just to give you an idea of the size, it's actually twice the length of an Olympic half pipe. Somebody in here might have noticed that Denmark got 0 medals in Sochi. So we hope that from 2017 we can improve that statistics, because now we can actually practice at home. Apart from the skiing, and here you see how the necessary vents are sort of integrated with skiable features. There's going to be a hiking, sort of picnic path for people that don't ski. It will be a big accessible public park. Only if you need the lift card, you pay. You'll be able to sort of reach up to the top and enjoy the spectacular view of otherwise flat Copenhagen. We're going to have the tallest climbing wall in the world, 100 meters of danger. And basically, you can say like the sort of diagram that I showed in the beginning before the talk, which is essentially this idea of the city as a man-made ecosystem, is coming very close to completion here, because not only do we harvest the locally available resources, rain, daylight, airflow, but also together with the citizens of Copenhagen, it forms an urban metabolism that turns waste into a resource. But the reason we could actually win the competition with this idea was because what's special about this power plant is that it's the cleanest waste-to-energy power plant in the world. So the smoke that comes out of the chimney is completely non-toxic. It contains a little CO2 and a little steam. But of course you can't see that. But and normally you would want to be as far away as possible from a power plant because it would be toxic. But here you actually literally have clean mountain air on top of the power plant, and that suddenly became visible. It must be a new kind of power plant if you can ski on it. So we thought like maybe just to take this idea one step further, as a sort of Danish twin to the project we're trying to do for the Battersea, we thought, what if we can completely reinvent the symbolism of a chimney? Together with Realities United and Copenhagen University and a guy called Rocket Madsen, we've designed the chimney so that it accumulates steam and then it puffs gigantic smoke rings or steam rings. And they're associated with the CO2 emissions, so each ring is the equivalent of 1 ton of CO2 being emitted. And the beauty is that knowledge always precedes action. If people don't know, they can't act. If you don't have information, you can't make informed design decisions. And nobody knows how much CO2 we emit. But if you come to Copenhagen, you can actually just count the steam rings from 2017, and you'll know exactly the carbon footprint. Of course, when you win a competition like this, then you realize that in the yellow pages, there's no giant steam ring emission manufacturers. So we spent quite a bit of time with this wing of our office called Big Ideas, together with the Copenhagen University and this guy Rocket Madsen, who's essentially a guy who makes space rockets in a bicycle repair shop. And we've made a few tests, but last summer we had some promise.
at diskutere. Nu tror jeg sgu på det. Det er fandme godt. Ej, hvor er det vigtigt. Hvor er det vigtigt.
So maybe this idea of a power plant emitting smoke rings, I think it's also sort of a nice reminder that at its core, architecture is sort of the art and science of turning fiction into fact. Because we sit in the studio and we brainstorm about ideas and we come up with like wild ideas, and it's like pure fiction when we sort of come up with it. But then we spend the next 5 to 10 years applying for all of the permits, raising all the money, solving all the technical difficulties. And then once it's realized, it actually sort of really becomes concrete reality. And I totally like this idea that from 2017, you know, if an American goes to Europe, he'll come back and sort of explain, you know, in Italy, it's amazing. Like in Venice, they have streets paved with water where they sail around in gondolas. And in Copenhagen, their power plants turn trash into electricity, and they can ski on them, and they puff gigantic smoke rings. And that's just simply how it is. So in that sense, there's this like world-changing element to architecture that I think is quite important to remember as architects and people in general, that every time we're invited to intervene or accommodate something, create a new building or a new urban space, we don't only have to like solve the problems that are being presented to us, but we also have the possibility and the responsibility to make the world a little bit more like our dream.